John and Steve trying to solve the problem with the canvas cover and the metal frame. Martin, Ron, Roger, and Bob discussing whether the canvas shrunk or the metal frame became larger. Roger telling Bob, "We'll let them look after it." Bob, John, and Roger busy cutting up the potatoes into wedges. Ron, Martin, and Steve ready to make coleslaw as soon as Gloria shows up with the sauce. John Service trimming the rotten spots off the potatoes. John still busy cutting the defective parts off of the potatoes. Martin telling Ron how to fill the deep fryers with vegetable oil while Steve looks on. Ron and Steve discussing the best way to place the food trays between the fryers. The takeout food line tables are in place and the canvas cover is good to go. Steve and Ron leveling up the deep fryer frame. Now Ron Ferguson can easily adjust the height of all the deep fryers in order to have them level. All the tools are ready to half and core the cabbage for coleslaw. Steve telling John that these fundraisers are a lot of work. Steve talking to his sweetheart on the phone while John watches the members working. Roger Bender, our club treasurer, hoping for a bright sunny day and a good attendance. Martin blanching the potatoes, Ron and Roger discussing the problems with the fryers. 40 styrofoam containers containing 10 pounds of fresh white fish fillets from Coddles in Kitchener. Bob Lehman washing and brushing the cutting blades off of the potato cutting press. Marlene Whiffen, busy in the kitchen, washing up the food utensils before the fish fry. Everything is arranged on the counter, ready for a busy afternoon. Empty portion containers for tartar sauce waiting to be filled. John Schultz looking for some serving trays to put the 4-ounce portion cups on after being filled with tartar sauce that accompany the takeout meals. Marlene and Shirley Wabro are busy washing, coring, and quartering tomatoes for the fish fry. Martin mixing the cut cabbage with the homemade salad dressing to make coleslaw under the watchful eye of Gloria Whitlaufer. Gloria telling Martin, "I think we have plenty of coleslaw. I just ran out of salad dressing." John Schultz, John Service, and Steve Cahill didn't realize the cabbage cutter was that heavy and clumsy and hard to move on soft ground, but they finally got it back on this concrete where it moved quite easily. Bob Lehman watching Ron Ferguson and Bob Rudy blanching potato wedges. Bill Whittlaufer has had enough. He's looking for a chair to sit down on. Martin, Bob, and John relaxing for a few moments before the fish fry begins. Ron Ferguson and Bob Rudy still blanching potatoes. The fish fry is over, and Ron Ferguson receives a helping hand from Ross Shum to drain all the old vegetable oil out of the deep fryers into the original containers to be recycled. Bill Whittlaufer is busy scrubbing up the various utensils used during the fish fry, and you can see the collection of greasy totes that stored the blanched French fries sitting there waiting to be scrubbed. Steve busy organizing the pots and pans, and finally coming to Bill's rescue to give him a hand scrubbing up the totes. What a mess of containers, and where is all the help to help clean up? Ron Ferguson and Greg Pye discussing and leveling the new platform for the 5 deep fryers. Ron Ferguson setting up the serving trays between the deep fryers. Greg Pye working on the deep fryers. Ron satisfied that the deep fryers are all leveled up properly. Roger Bender and Bill Whittlaufer discussing how clean and quick the cabbage cutter is, while Steve Cahill cuts up cabbage heads. Setting up the equipment to start cutting up whole potatoes into wedges. Dwayne, Mike, and Brian processing potatoes, and Roger and Bill busy cutting up cabbage. Steve Cahill, John Schultz, and Bill Whittlaufer cutting the cabbage heads in half and then removing the core. Roger Bender mesmerized by the cabbage cutter while feeding in cabbage heads. After the cabbage is cut in half, the core is removed. Bill Whittlaufer and John Schultz cutting up cabbage while the potato crew enjoy a joke. Let's oil the potato cutter to make the job easier. Brian is busy opening another bag of potatoes. Brian is telling the boys how he had done it previously. Bob Lehman, rinsing the starch and foreign material off the potato wedges in cold water. The potato crew busy, and they have a few bags of potatoes left to do. The totes, waiting to be filled with potato wedges. Bill and Roger, cleaning up the utensils and tables after finishing the cold slaw process. Brian, relating his past experiences at his back home fish fries. Martin, picking out the coarse pieces of cabbage before Gloria arrives with the sauce. Bill and John watching Martin taking the coarse pieces of cabbage out. Ron is making sure the pilot light remains lit. Martin telling Bill and John that they can do the other tub of cut cabbage. Ron and Greg keeping an eye on the deep fryers. Gloria has just arrived on the scene with the secret salad dressing. Bill questioning Gloria, "Where have you been? The guys are waiting." Ron waiting for the deep fryers to heat the oil to the proper temperature. John and Martin waiting to start adding the salad dressing to the cut cabbage. Greg Pye having problems with the main propane valves in a couple of the deep fryers. Martin still picking large pieces of leaves out of the cut cabbage. Bill and John finally making the finished product. Bill adding the salad dressing to the cut cabbage. Members still cutting up potato wedges, while Steve, I think, is on a mission. The potato crew are still cutting up the whole potatoes while Bob and Brian are rinsing them off in cold water. Ron, Roger, and Frank Wabro putting the canvas on the top of the food tent. Roger has a short memory because he is quite confused as to how to secure the cover onto the steel frame. Ron and Frank trying to stretch the cover over the last section of metal frame. Frank Wabro was finally successful in getting the cover of the food tent around the metal frame. Roger is asking Steve, what else has to be done before the fish fry begins? Steve tells Roger we better help clean up the table and floor where they were making coleslaw. Mike Kaufman and Dwayne Crook finishing up the 8 bags of potatoes. Greg and Ron having a serious problem with one of the deep fryers. Greg takes a break and lets Ron Ferguson get at it. Steve busy rinsing out the totes that were filled with cut cabbage. Steve just finished rinsing the residue cut cabbage off of the cabbage cutter. Bill and John busy filling the last tubs with coleslaw. Steve sweeping up the cut cabbage off the floor under the watchful eye of Bill Whitlaufer. Bill getting ready to relax while Steve is telling Martin to move his big feet. Bill finally sitting down and Martin admiring Steve as he's sweeping the floor. Ron and Greg finally have the problem with the deep fryer solved. Brian taking the fine pieces of potatoes out of the drain in the sink. Mike and Dwayne still processing potatoes. Bill tells Steve how it works, while the broom handle holds up Steve's arm and Greg's checking out the potato process. Steve's on a mission, while Martin keeps an eye on everybody. Still busy at the potato process. Brian Boland going for another tote to store the cut potatoes in. Ron Ferguson giving Mike Kaufman a helping hand with the potato process. Martin relaxing. Steve busy cleaning up the potato cutter. Ross Shum returning with his truck loaded with tomatoes from the Red Barn. John Schultz busy in the kitchen while Dwayne has his hands in his pockets. Ross Shum bringing in the flats of tomatoes and placing them on the countertop to be quartered later on. Ross and our treasurer Roger trying to figure out the cost of the tomatoes. John Schultz filling the 4-ounce portion cups with tartar sauce to accompany the takeout meals. Brian Boland busy blanching the potato wedges. Ron Ferguson happy that all the deep fryers are operational. Jack Whitlaufer delivering the fresh fish from Cottle's Catch in Kitchener. Al Calder directing Jack as he backs up his truck. Jack is keeping an eye on Al as he admires all the boxes of fish fillets. 400 pounds of fresh white fish fillets waiting to be deep fried. Jack busy unloading the boxes of fish fillets. Martin deep in thought as Al continues to unload the fillets and Greg is busy blanching potato wedges. Steve busy discussing the fish fry with Greg and Gloria. Brian Boland blanching potato wedges. Jack unloading the last box of fish fillets. Jack, happy that his obligation toward the fish fry was successful. Steve, busy mixing up the various components for the fish batter. This fish batter is a combination of quite a few ingredients. Martin and Steve deserve a well-earned rest. Brian and Ron still blanching potato wedges. Ron and Greg discussing the deep fryer problems while Brian is busy blanching potato wedges. The billboard sign advertising the fish fry. Greg Pye still not happy with the performance of the deep fryer. Bob Lehman and Dwayne Krupp discussing the price of the fresh fish and the events of the day. Steve counting out the plastic knives and forks for the food lines. Roger and Bill getting the garbage bags in the barrels and cleaning up the used corrugated cardboard. The chairs